Sup, chicken nuggets? Knitted Anus here. I heard you guys want to hear more about how the CIA runs all of America's foreign policy, huh? Let's take it back to the Eisenhower era this time. Have you guys ever heard of Mohammad Mossadegh or the country of Iran? Class, we're reading from The Devil's Chessboard by David Talbot today. Mossadegh, a dedicated patriot and wily survivor of Iran's treacherous politics, had antagonized the British government by nationalizing the powerful Anglo-Iranian oil company, later named BP. Soon after taking office in 1951, the British behemoth, the third largest producer of crude oil in the world, which ruled with imperial arrogance for much of the 20th century, crushing labor strikes in the hellish oil fields and propping up and replacing local regimes at will, Mossadegh's defiant seizure of Iran's oil treasure set off a global thunderclap. So then British MI5 started going after Mossadegh's government and trying to undermine them. So Mossadegh kicked them out of Tehran, the embassy. Got rid of the embassy altogether. Awesome. But you guys are not gonna believe what they do. They turn to the CIA. It's always the fucking CIA. London turned to Washington for assistance. But wait, you're probably like, why do I care what BP thinks? What do the people of Iran think? His people loved him. His patriotic rhetoric stirred the passions of Iranian people whose fate had long been determined by foreign powers. And then Iran's parliament voted to blow up a deal with British Petroleum. So then BP started crying. The best part is that Mossadegh didn't tell him to fuck off. He gave them a fair deal. BP had already been offered fair compensation for its losses. He didn't even steal it. But of course they're not happy. They want more. They want all of the land. They want all of his stuff. And Mossadegh said no, because his reputation would be forever stained with the Iranian people. And they would immediately assume that he had sold their nation off once again. So one of the things that Britain started doing to Mossadegh to sabotage his government was blockading it economically, you know. Get this, Eisenhower sent a sympathetic note to Mossadegh bemoaning the economic blockade by Britain. Eisenhower's innate Midwestern sense of decency initially made him recoil from backing Britain's colonial siege of Iran. Not only that, but then he suggested to the Dulles brothers, maybe we should give them $100 million loan instead of toppling their government. That sounds pretty reasonable. Yeah, do that. So then Eisenhower gave him $100 million loan, and everyone in Iran has been fine ever since. No, I'm just kidding. Alan Dulles fucking showed up. God damn it. Realizing that Eisenhower was not inclined to defend British imperial interests, the Dulles brothers reframed their argument for intervention in Cold War terms because Eisenhower hates communism. Then my boy Dulles drops this bomb on Eisenhower. He warned that if the country fell into communistic hands, 60% of the free world's oil would be controlled by Moscow. Oil and gas would have to be rationed at home, and the U.S. military operations would have to be curtailed. I don't want to just steal these people's natural resources on the other side of the world, but I don't know. And if you guys don't know anything about American history, communist is like the easiest way to just shut down all conversation. If you don't like what someone's saying, communist. It's like Antifa. That's what it is, you know? And if communist doesn't work, they're working with Russia. So Mossadegh's working with Russia. Guess what? Mossadegh wasn't a communist or a Russian stooge. But it doesn't matter, because after weeks of intensive lobbying by the Dulles brothers and the British government, Eisenhower became convinced that Iran was a Cold War battleground and that Mossadegh had to go. Okay, the story of the coup could literally have its own 10-minute video, but real quick. So for 2 years, the CIA planted an agent there who just so happened to be like the grandson of Teddy Roosevelt. This is too stupid, I can't. Kermit Kim Roosevelt Jr. So for 2 years, he was basically just burying guns and handing out money to, like, tribes to fight against Mossadegh. So this is always the move, right? The CIA, when there's a democratically elected person who says, we're going to take our resources back from all these multinational corporations. We're going to keep our oil. We're going to keep our fruit. We're going to keep our land. Whatever it is, what the CIA does is goes, they're communists, and then you need to make them into terrorists, and then somehow get a right-leaning dictator in who's usually like military, you know? Luckily for the CIA, they didn't have a military guy this time. They already had someone who was installed. He was the Shah of Iran that the people already hated and that they had already gotten rid of and replaced with Mossadegh. So the CIA was like, let's bring him back. So on the day of the coup, it was initiated because the Mossadegh had done like a parliamentary thing to get rid of the Shah, to remove his power so that he could finally nationalize the oil and get rid of British petroleum, right? So the CIA tries to do a coup, but it fails that day, and everything gets really scary. Mossadegh's supporters all come out, they're all in the streets, and then they start trying to, get rid of the Shah. They try and kill him. They scare that guy and his wife so much that he gets on a plane and flies to Baghdad. And little Kermit sitting in Tehran like, oh man, come on, give me one more shot. So Allen Dulles gets Henderson, the ambassador to Iran from America, to ask Mossadegh, hey, I'm going to withdraw all Americans and everything if you don't restore order. It's really scary here, man. Get everyone off the streets. Get all your supporters off the street. And Mossadegh is very naive. He likes America. He thinks that America is going to save him from Britain. My boy Mossadegh was so naive to Allen Dulles' ways. Because then with his supporters off the streets, the CIA's hired thugs were free to take their place, backed by rebellious elements of the military. For 2 hours, they raged a gunfight outside Mossadegh's home. They had tanks, including 2 powerful U.S.-built Shermans, and I wonder where that came from. Mossadegh ended up fleeing his home and was arrested. But the coup's not over until we got someone in charge who works for the CIA. You're like, where's Allen Dulles? You keep talking about Allen Dulles. You dudes will never guess the coinkydinks in this one. Allen Dulles and the Shah both showed up at the reception desk at the Excelsior in Rome at the very same moment. That's so weird. Dulles' main mission in Rome was to stiffen the Shah's spine and whisk him back to the peacock throne, because of course the Shah is a fucking coward. The royal couple were taking their lunch at the Excelsior when they heard that Mossadegh had been overthrown. The Shah seemed shaken by the news instead of overjoyed. His jaw dropped. According to one observer, his trembling fingers reached for his cigarette, and he said, I have to admit that I haven't had a very important part in the revolution. He knew that he was returning to a roiling tempest in Iran where he was widely reviled by his subjects as a puppet of Western power. Don't worry, because his best buddy Allen Dulles rode with him on the plane. But you're like, okay, so the CIA propped up this dude. The Iranian people aren't going to support him? True, but it doesn't matter because the CIA just spread money around to make sure that people would greet him. And by the time he was carried back to the palace in the royal limousine past the dutifully and enthusiastic throngs on the street that were all paid, the Shah had convinced himself that he was indeed a man of destiny instead of just another creature of the CIA. Well, I'm sure American media wrote about this and everyone probably said a bunch of stuff about this, right? The US press even avoided using awkward words like coup, preferring to describe the CIA-engineered operation as a popular uprising or a nation's revolt. Wait, the media and the CIA are all like, Yep, they are. All of them. Companies, the media, and government are all circle and, If Dulles carefully concealed the CIA's role from the American public, he made sure that the Shah was made fully aware of the debt he owed the agency. He proved very useful for Western interests, including those of some of the Dulles brothers' leading former clients. Under a new agreement with the major oil companies orchestrated by the Shah a few months after the coup, Iran's oil industry was denationalized. Once again, the country's national treasure was handed over to foreign corporations, with 40% of the spoils now going to American oil producers, blah, blah, blah. Then a couple years later, Kermit Roosevelt joined the board of Gulf. Then the CIA said you guys should do Gestapo stuff and killed 4,000 leftists. Now Allen Dulles has an airport named after him. We're never gonna stop doing endless war, and you should follow. Bye!